Welcome to Encounter Grace. We're glad you're here. I'm Jason McKnight with Ben Hendricks, Susan McKnight, on part 3 of our little jaunt into parenting. Ben, what have you learned so far?
That I can't trust your intros. Are we doing 2 or are we doing 3? I mean, but here we are.
It's true. I started out in part 1 thinking it was going to be part 2, but then Ben kept adding questions.
Our podcasts are becoming like our meetings. It's just going to be a quick
5 minutes.
So,
two-parter.
we have this wonderful, we're leaning now into the middle school, high school years, the teen years, and even I think a bit beyond into college. I don't think we're out of these years yet, even though we have one kid as a junior in college and one other as a senior in high school. I think we're still in this stage. The first, second, third, fourth stage of parenting. Episode 1 or part 1 of this little series is on the discipline years, where they're learning the rules of the game, whatever sport they're playing. Then the training years, where they're putting into practice the plays and they're getting conditioned.
You're understanding the why.
And understanding the why of the game. So the what of the game and then the why, or the what of life, consequences, discipline years, and then training the why and why things work and how it goes. Now we get to the very fun stage of teenagers. And I love this. And I think you might talk about this, but age of opportunity. Paul David Tripp's title of his book about the teen years. And I just love that optimism. These are not years to be dreaded, not in God's intention, perhaps in our cultures, but that's never necessarily God's.
Or just survived.
Yeah. This is an age of opportunity. But in these 4 stages, it's not called age of opportunity. What are we getting into as parents, as our kids develop, and so we have to develop in our parenting?
Right.
What is this stage?
This is the coaching years. This is the stage of coaching. And this is ages 12 to 18-ish. We keep saying that because it might start at 13 with somebody. It might even start at 11 and a half for somebody. But and these are the years that don't have to be dreaded. And I would challenge you, after reading this book, Age of Opportunity, that Jason talked about, to go into these years saying, Lord, help us to lean into this and have fun, and also know how to keep pouring into our kids and not just say, when are we going to be done with this? Because I grew and have grown so much in these years. And it's been such a joy. So the coaching years, you've done a lot of hard work in the discipline years. You've done a lot of hard work in the training years, but helping them learn to obey. Remember, we talked about obeying all the way right away with a happy heart. In the training years, you keep practicing obeying, helping them understand why they need to obey, why God has set up families in such a way as that a mom and dad are in charge. And it's ultimately so that they'll learn to rely on God one day as their authority figure. And then all of a sudden, something happens. And your child really starts to change right before your very eyes. And you think you're prepared for this. You've heard a lot about what's coming. But you look at your child one day and you ask, as a friend of mine told me she did this, who are you? Who is this alien who's taken over my child? And what did you do with my sweet baby? It just happens. Your kids go from the training years where they don't need you as much, but they still want you, to these coaching years where you don't really know anything at all. And so why would they need you? They don't even want you to be around that much. So this is a very different season of life for your child. That means it's a different stage of life in parenting, and we've got to make that pivot. It is super helpful to understand that they say change brings stress. Well, a teenager is changing constantly. I mean, one day they are wearing one pair of pants and the next day they've grown 3 inches overnight. I mean, it literally feels that way, but not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, they're changing all these different ways. So this probably will be the biggest relational adjustment of all for you as a parent, to shift into this stage.
So you don't have to feel like you're going to fail within the first year. Like, don't worry. Don't have pressure, parents. Like, you're changing too.
Right.
So we don't have to think. I mean, we made so many mistakes.
Yeah.
So many mistakes at every level.
Yes.
But also in this coaching year era, because boy, Dad, He might like to be a lecturer more than a coach sometimes.
Yeah, you love the training years, and that's great.
Look at how gracious she is.
But we didn't realize this change was happening
Yeah.
in this way, and so we didn't shift our mindset. So let's talk about what it looks like, and then maybe people can understand it more. So what happens in this stage is that we as parents get to loosen the tight reins and move more to the sidelines for coaching. Now, this does not happen immediately to this full extent, but I'm saying over these years, here's what happens. We let our kids start making more independent decisions. They're the ones in the game. We're on the sidelines, coaching, cheering them on. We give them some instructions. We give them some suggestions like a coach does. But coaches don't leave the field. They don't get distracted with something else. They're fully in, but fully in from the sidelines. They watch carefully. They call some plays, right? But sometimes they have to pull or yank a player out for a little while off the field. They encourage the players to run the plays and respond to the situations according to the training that came before. So this is why it's super important in your discipline years and in your training years to build this foundation, because in the coaching years, you're going to be referring back to that, so many times in what we're doing. Here's what one woman said: largely in this season of parenting or this stage of parenting, largely you let them process information and decide for themselves. If you try to force teachable moments or bring back training tactics too often, you'll lose them. They'll stop talking. They'll be so ready to leave home in order to have some leeway to succeed or fail apart from you. And that sounds really harsh, but again, this is not at age 12.1. This is over time. You're letting them grow into processing information and deciding for themselves. But I think that's really, really a very insightful quote from this.
Well, I'm thinking Ben has probably watched several of our students over the 7 years he's been here take this shift from coming in as a sixth grader into the mill, into the community of the mill, and still kind of maybe at the tail end of the training years into the coaching years where they're processing information for themselves. I mean, what have you observed about that? And do you affirm that, or do you think this quote is kind of on target or off target?
No, I agree with all of it. Every year, it's a hard transition. It's why we do our best to focus on, major key transition points for all of our students. But I think probably the biggest, or for sure one of them, is that kind of 5th to 6th grade, or 6th to 7th, like somewhere in there. Because, just as you were talking about, Susan, like change brings stress. Like I try to remind our parents a good bit, and our students that you're in one of the hardest seasons. And, it's easy to go, they don't have a job. They don't have but their world is changing.
Yes.
And some major things are changing. I often call it a season of firsts, because sure, they've done some of these things before, but now there's real consequences because they're not on the practice field, they're in the game. And so the stakes are higher.
Right.
Because it's one thing to be awkward in front of mom and dad at the dinner table, or, to do the really goofy thing. It's a different one when she invites you over.
Totally.
Or when he asks you on the date or whatever. The stakes are higher, the consequences are bigger. And so they get that.
Right.
They feel that. And so I think all of the change that's going on, that brings stress. I love, the quote is great as well. I love what you had said right before that, actually. You said they encourage players to run the plays and respond to situations according to the training that came before. One of the things that I've seen that's very, that's been super helpful for me, and it's that transition from the training years to the coaching years. It makes it hard because the training years is kind of like, here's what you need to do.
Right.
Because I'm training you. And so 6th graders come in, most of them in the training years. Sometimes it's coaching, but usually training. But somewhere along the lines, they go from, I don't want you to tell me, but I want to figure it out myself with a little direction from the sideline. So a coach, right?
Right.
And so one of the things I've kind of, just as that was saying, is to respond to situations according to the training that came before, is as that shift kind of happens, I've learned like it's not always the right season to add to them, but the right season to point to what they already know. Because the great thing about so many of our students, but I think so many in general, when you've done the training years well, is you just get to keep pointing back to the things they know. And I've seen God bring so much fruit just through that idea. Like when they're not doing something and maybe they don't know it,
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
but you invite them going, hey, look, I know you already know this.
Right.
But here's what we need to do. And they're like, oh, yeah, I knew that. And so whether they did or not, like like it's a coaching time. It's not just a training because there's so much pushback. And parents, you've seen this. If you have kids in this time, it's like, don't tell me. No, I want to like they want to seem like they know it.
Right.
Like, I think I'm still in this phase.
Right. Right.
Like, but when somebody is like, hey, I know you know this, but let me call you up to it. Like, I think that's what a coach does.
Right. Right.
And there is a little nuance between that kind of trainer and then the coach.
Right.
And so I've just found that to be a helpful thing to keep pointing them back to the thing and like, hey, this is the time where you're living out those things.
Right.
And you get to live them out here. But also with the humility of going,
Yeah.
you're in a season of firsts. And
Right.
Mm.
Right.
figuring out those consequences. And sometimes, just like I did, you get cold feet, and that's why you didn't do that.
Right.
That's why you didn't treat them like that. That's why you didn't act like that. That's why you lost your temper like that. And so, I think, I just think it's a hard season. I also think why at the very beginning of episode 1 on this, we talked about the importance of relationship and then not just like trying to fix the kid. Like, this is where that idea becomes gold.
Yes, absolutely.
Like,
And yep.
and again, and I think I said in that part, like I try to train our leaders and I invite our students into it. And I try to always remember it, like connection really does matter more than content because the connection with the student, that relationship that you're building, the one that you have with your kids, that lays fertile ground for the content to be understood, to be seen, to be heard. And then for them to to actually not be pushing back so hard that they're willing to accept it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
And
Well, and I think that's great, Ben. I think a parent also might hear, and this is one of the things we were going to say next. At this stage, you as a parent need to connect more than you correct.
okay, so
So, like
great.
as a youth leader, you're not thinking of yourself as correcting these kids, but as a parent, that's what we do because we want our kids to, have manners and do all these things like this. But if in this stage, we need to shift to, we're not aiming for correction now, we're aiming to connect. And it's for the same reason that you just outlined there.
And go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, because we do want our kids to grow up knowing right from wrong. But if you've done the discipline, if you've done the training years, these are the years they're gonna make it their own, and they're gonna put that practice into this is what I'm all about, and they're gonna learn this while they're still under your roof.
Yeah.
And it won't be a straight line learning. It'll be all sorts of zigzags.
Oh my, yes.
And
yes.
thankfully, they're still under your roof. So how do we lean into connecting, which is what you're very good at, versus correcting, which is what I always wanted to do? Like,
So
how do we lean into
connecting.
that in real time?
Yeah. And here it said connect more than correct. So we're still going to have to do some correcting because a
good.
coach
Because
does.
it's true, yeah.
Yeah.
On the
that's
sidelines. You didn't run that play the way we practiced. So that's correcting.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking of this from like, because I look, as a parent, I haven't gotten here yet.
Right.
But like, as a leader of students, like, I'm here. Like, this is where we are.
Yep.
And so there always is a place where you go, that's a line that we have to correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're willing to singe a little bit of the connection because the correction is that important.
Right.
And now you do your best not to hurt any of that connection, and you love them through it all. But like that's just as it's very true in student ministry as well.
Right.
I mean, at least the way that I'm understanding it, because it's like there are just certain things. A student will come dressed like this, or acting like this, or will bring this to youth group. I'm like,
Or
that's
say
not,
that.
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is just not something that we
That's
do
who we
here.
are. That's right.
And so that's worth correcting,
Right.
Because other people are seeing it.
Right.
Same with parents. I mean,
Right, yes.
it's not connect
Absolutely.
without ever correcting. It's connect
Yeah.
is our primary, is
Right.
more than.
More
Yeah.
than. And I think just the reminder to connect, period, is huge for parents because of the busyness that we talked about before, because of you get into this mindset, we just got to get through these years. And they do get busy in a really different way than the training years. And so you could just focus on, let's keep going. But no. All right, as a parent, one of your big roles is connecting. So how do we do that? I think one of the number one things is we've got to invest in constant conversation. And when I say conversation, I'm not saying lectures. I'm not saying monologues by the parents. I'm saying conversations, listening to our kids, learning their interests, understanding their interpretation of things. Who are their favorite friends to be with? You want to cultivate an environment that is safe to them, where they feel safe talking to you. You want to be a safe place for them. So you need to be trustworthy. You need to ask questions that are relevant, that show you're interested in them, that show you listened to them yesterday when they told you this. Don't ask them the same question the next day, because they're going to go, well, she's not listening to me anyway. We need to connect by showing respect for them, to understand them, investing in constant conversation. But to do this, a huge thing we have to be available. To invest in constant conversation, we have to be available. Are you making yourself available? Sometimes I'd hear one of our boys say something crazy that seemed so against, it sounded like the culture, and it seemed so against what we had taught them, growing up. And I would freak out. But I have learned a few things. One of them is, specifically with teenagers, you can't, as a parent, you can't freak out. That means you can't show any strong emotion. And I have to pray about this. You'll probably have to do that too. Train your face not to panic. Hold your tongue. Because don't you want your kid to approach you and share their lives with you? Yes. And when I would overreact to whatever information they would say, whatever sentence they would come out with,
misinformation.
Or misinformation.
Nip in the bud and get them right.
Yeah, you want to correct that. Of course you do. But there's a chance and there's a place to do that. When I would overreact to those things, I would send mixed signals to my kids and they would shut down. And
Wait, this sure works husband and wife too, doesn't it?
when
I overreact.
No, I'm just kidding. Well, that's true. It's usually me overreacting.
No,
but
that's not true.
So instead of freaking out, I had to learn to bite my tongue, keep my face pleasant, and then ask some more questions to understand where they were coming from. Well, when I would do that, they would feel respected. And there wasn't an air of mom's coming to get me and to correct me, but it was, oh, mom's interested and wants to understand where I'm coming from. Yeah. So it kept great conversations. It kept the doors open to that. It created, maybe, hopefully, that she's a safe person to go to. And don't we want that? Don't we want them to come to us and share these things with us? And yes, we do. I'll answer that for you. Yes, we do.
So to work at connecting, some tools to help is A, be available. B is when they say something off the wall or flat out wrong or against everything they've
Right.
It's like, Lord, when do I correct? Well, that is a great prayer to pray.
Yes.
And you can pray it in about a half a second.
Yes.
Lord, when do I correct? Because it is true. We don't want to let them live in a false world. Okay. But when, train your face not to panic, hold your tongue, take a deep breath. And this is true in any stressful situation, the oxygen drains. Take a deep breath in. Watch God do something.
And a great phrase I learned to say was, tell me more about that.
Tell me more about that.
Because
I forget what to say.
Them a chance to tell you more about it, and they feel honored and respected that you want to know. But a lot of times what I saw happen was, as they talked, they kind of landed the plane saying, yeah, that was kind of stupid anyway. Like, they came to that conclusion on their own. And you know what? I didn't have to say a thing because they came to that. And even if they didn't and they still went down that road, because I respected them listening when I could do that, they would listen to me then. Yeah. Because it had been set, the table had been set in that way for them to be able to say, well, I guess I can listen to you.
Great.
So
excellent.
Invest in constant conversation. A great place to do this is in the car. Parents of teenagers, you're going to be in the car all the time. And if you think you were in the car a lot in the training years, hold on, because it just changes somehow in these teen years. But decide right now to embrace it, to be thankful for that time, and not to grumble about how much gas is and how much, driving all over Eastern North Carolina is. Y'all, these are great. Graham Spear said that to us. He said, you're never going to have this opportunity to be with your kids in this way again. Just decide to enjoy it. And wow, we went everywhere, and it turned out to be a really great thing for our relationship and opened up the doors for that constant conversation.
Yeah, and coming home from the out of town sports games and stuff that your kids are playing on, or if it's dance or whatever, all those times in the car. Yep, that's and we do miss them.
Yeah,
we do miss them.
It's true.
Okay, so investing in constant conversation. How else? What's another thing that is helpful for us to know as we seek to connect?
More than correct. Great. Number 2 is really, 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 really hard, but we have to let them fail. We can't always bail them out of things. They are growing into being adults, and the best place to fail is when they're still in your home. They're going to know grace. They're going to experience your love through that, and they're going to have your help as they face failure and understand God's grace more in that and that kind of thing. But we've got to let them experience the natural consequences that stem from their actions. So how does this play out? Well, this is a really simple thing, but we have one very wise friend who told her kids when they turned 16, she said, I'm gonna pay for your car insurance, but if you get pulled over for speeding and you get a ticket and the insurance goes up, then that's on you. She said, you're going to pay the ticket and you're going to pay the difference in the insurance hike. And guess what? Her child got pulled over for speeding, and guess what? He got a ticket, and sure enough, he had to pay. He had to pay for the difference in those things. And you know what happened? He stopped speeding.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to have to pay again. He didn't have that in his bank account. That's not where he wanted his money going. So that's a simple example, but we've just got to let them fail. We can't bail them out. Let them do that when they're in your home, so that once they're out of it, they've had some of those experiences and know how to react and know how to respond to it.
So good. Because I think there are a few better connections than failure. Like, and I think we kind of hate this, but like you just being available when they fail, and then and then having, so I think availability, but also vulnerability.
Yeah.
Like, so you're like, been there. Like,
Yes.
that's hard. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just here, and I love, and I'm gonna be here with you through it.
Yeah.
So that kind of availability, but also going, this may annoy you, but let me tell you about the time I went through something, because they were like, oh, it's not the same.
Right.
But they still hear it.
Yeah, it's true.
And you getting to be open and honest about how you messed up, like, it's just an invitation into connection. Like,
That's good.
It's so good.
It's so good. I would say some of our sweetest times were after really tough decisions that the boys made at different points in their lives. And it was so hard on us as parents. And the vulnerability of that, of finally getting to a point where we talk it through and help each other understand each other more. And I mean, I just, as much as I wouldn't have wanted them to have to do what they did to get to that point, wow, the sweetness that came from connecting from a really hard place like that, it's worth $1 million to me. So
I also think, while we're talking about failure and a safe place and vulnerability and connectivity, is that I think all through parenting, but even especially in the coaching years when things are sinking in deeper to growing young adults, when I as a dad fail and I apologize to them or to you in front of them, if it's appropriate, like if I lost my temper or something at dinner and yelled at you or them or something, well, a public sin needs a public apology.
right.
And so for the family to be in on seeing dad and mom also say, you know what, I'm in need of grace too.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
even the authority person at home also is under the authority of God's truth
Right.
and his righteousness.
Yeah, that's really true.
And in need of his grace. So, also when we fail, it actually makes the home an even safer place and coaching and modeling. in another way.
Yes.
So
Yes, modeling the gospel to your kids every day, and that we need the gospel, just like they need the gospel.
yeah. Yeah. And you do that all the way, like even when they're little, but
Right.
it can sink in a little more because they're more aware of their failures maybe in the teen years
Right.
because a lot of stuff is going against them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think you have one more for us.
One more. How do we connect more than we correct? I think we get interested in what interests them. So you might like football, and you might want your son to sit on the couch and watch football with you every Sunday. But if he doesn't like football, then don't force him to like it. We're not huge sports fans, but Andrew loves sports, and he played every sport he could, every season he could. And so we just had to dive in and go for it. And we learned to love it. And it, again, was great for our relationship because all that driving around, all those opportunities to be with him, it was just, it was so precious. So learn what your child loves and jump in with them to support them and be in on it with them and to build them up in that way.
Good.
These are good.
I mean, they are like,
And they're practical and helpful. Like, I mean, I just think we're always looking for like, I can't relate. We don't have a connect. Like,
Right.
This is-
Mhm.
there is something that they do love and that they do
Yep.
care about.
Right.
And it may not be what I care about.
Right.
But you can I see it in student ministry. You can watch someone open up when you meet them with
Yeah.
where they are.
Right.
Where they
right,
are.
Right.
And it's like there are games that I don't like that I now play. They're a little like, and it's just interesting
Yeah.
when you meet them. And that's what this is. It's going, hey, what is that thing that you love? I'm gonna meet you there.
Right.
Well, we get it. We intuit it with
Yeah.
the 2-year-old. Well, I'll
Yes.
get on my knees and I'll play the dumb thing with the Barbie dolls for the girls or whatever it is. I don't know.
Call
I
it
don't care that, but I'm doing that to be with you. How can you not also do that to the 15-year-old?
Right.
Just do it.
It's a great
Right.
point.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched endless seasons of Bluey, and I can quote it.
Yeah.
Aw.
Well, you're going to be listening to country music later when your kid starts. Oh, no, that happened to me.
I
That
rebuke
happened to me.
So here's what I think is really helpful and encouraging for me is like I just always need the reminder. So you kind of I can sometimes we can pit them against each other like connection and correction,
Mhm.
but you can
Yes.
correct and connect.
Yes.
And
yes.
you can correct and connect at the exact same time.
Right.
And it's hard, but
Mhm.
it really is worth it. And I think a lot like sometimes we just don't believe that.
Right.
We think like, oh, I've got to when am I willing to break this thing so I can fix that thing?
Right.
And it's like there are ways to do that. And the reason why I know that is because that's what Jesus did.
Yeah.
And so I think like as I was just kind of processing through that, and I think every one of these is proving these is like if we want to connect and correct at the same time, we always have to do so in humility.
Yes.
Like that part of
Yes.
that, like using my failures as a way to enter into yours and to heal, like and to help you walk through that.
Right.
Because one of the biggest complaints that every student seems to have is you just don't get it. You don't understand. It was different then. It's like, and then they get in their late 20s and they're like, oh, it wasn't. Never mind.
Right. Right.
Or they're in their 30s and they're saying the same thing. They're like, oh wait, no, man.
Mhm.
I think being able to walk that out with our students is unbelievably helpful.
Yes.
Like that whole, and I said it earlier, but like, oh, man, I get that, been there. Like I wrestle with that. And I know you won't get it, and I know it's probably different, but let me tell you about how I made it through this. Like
Right.
walking through that and not making an assumption, it worked for me, so it's going to work for you, or I've got to fix this thing, but
Right.
it's kind of doing both.
Mm-hmm.
Also, same idea, but like kind of the second thing is love, just loving them through it. I think always reminding them that yes, you're in a mess. Yes, you're broken. So am I. Back to humility. And I'm going to love you through it anyways.
Right.
Sounds a lot like kind of Jesus, except he wasn't broken, right?
Right.
And so like being able to help them have that foundation is such a helpful thing that it's like, I mean, I remember for me, like oftentimes I didn't want to ask for help or fess up or be open with something because I'm like, this mess will affect my relationship with my mom or my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned way too late that, oh, it doesn't.
Yeah.
They already knew.
You're right.
Like,
right.
they had already heard from somebody, the other teacher,
Yeah.
or like I would have just walked into healing when I thought I was going to walk into breaking
Right.
something down.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
I think trying to like lead with that and that kind of love and helping them know this is, and somebody said it already earlier, this is a safe place. Like
Right.
our messes don't affect our relationship. Like those are set in stone, but
Mhm.
we're going to
Mhm.
help ourselves and all of us out of the mess. I think it's a really good thing.
And if we're honest and vulnerable and can be humble before one another, they can affect our relationship, because I think our relationship can
That's
go
true,
deeper.
yeah.
So I think that's what I was trying to say before, was when we were in those messy places with each other, boy, that helped go deeper in the
Yeah.
relationship. So
And then also just like kind of that third thing, because Jesus always did this, like he always invited us into something better or something more.
right.
Like again, in my understanding, like every time in scripture, when Jesus would give something of like, hey, like we just don't do this, or let me lead you out of that, it was always into leading into something better, into something clear, into something more fruitful, into something more flourishing. And I think giving kids that outlet is helpful.
Right.
You don't have to explain yourself on everything, but in this season, it's helpful to explain, going, look, and here's why. And they may not always hear it, they may not always understand it, but they're already learning, at least at some point, of like, my mom or my dad want the best for me.
Right.
And I may not agree with them, and
Right.
or maybe I don't even understand that, but like I'm getting that picture of it. And at least, a couple years down the road, they're like,
Right. Right.
And so I think that's just helpful, because like, look, at least one of your boys, and I was this way. And we have so many guys in our student ministry, but also some of the girls who like being called up to something. That's what this is. It's calling them up to that thing like, hey, this is a better way to do it. It's also harder,
Right.
but it's so much better.
Right.
And so I think like there's an aspect of when we have all three of those, and we're trying to keeping those in mind, kind of the humility, the love, and calling someone up to something or inviting them into something better. Like we really can kind of correct and build
As we go.
that connection as well.
Yep, you're right. I think it's helpful to think, okay, my goal in these coaching years is to keep my son, my daughter coming to me for guidance and support. So, well, that changes how I'm going to do things then. Because if I want to keep them coming to me, then I can't just be constantly harping, constantly correcting, constantly doing that. But I'm going to be building a relationship with them, opening these doors, cultivating a constant conversation, letting them fail, but being with them in the failure. And that really has helped me in terms of drawing them out so they stay open to you. There's a great verse in Proverbs 25, that says, the purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. And I think I like to say the purposes of a teenager's heart are deep waters. It's hard to understand what's going on in a teenager's heart. There's so much going on. But a woman of understanding, a man of understanding draws them out. And what if that's us, a parent of understanding, can help draw them out as they're trying to figure out life? Well, we've got to keep them coming to us for guidance and support. So we want them to stay open to us in that.
Yeah, that's very good.
This is not in any way saying we don't still have rules. There aren't those
that's
times
right,
where
that's
we have to jump in and say something. Of course, you live in a household of people. There have to be rules for everybody, how you treat people, what you do. But the general tenor of how we operate as parents in this stage is what's changing. So we're stepping back to be more of a coach on the sidelines than maybe a personal trainer side by side.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in the discipline years, your kids are so little, they know so little of the world, they only know what you have allowed them to know. So in that sense, you are the expert. You are the God. I mean, this is the whole thing about parenting. You're showing them who God is, especially when they're really little, how to respond to authority, so on and so forth. But basically because you have defined their world.
Right.
By the time they're teenagers, they're in enough of the world that you can't define a world that isn't real.
Yeah. Right.
And you can't represent God in a false way.
Right.
So as we seek to connect with them, and as we lean into the relationship, and as we point them to the way of the Lord, as we're following Jesus, and we're hungry for him and delighting in him, those things will be uber winsome, uber helpful, super, super helpful. So investing in constant conversation, the whole thing about failure, let them fail. Don't protect them from failure, because it will build them up and teach them resilience, but also it's a safe place to fail at home, better than on the college campus or, whatever. And then also my own failure will also lead to connectivity. Get interested in what interests them. Do them that respect and honor,
Right.
And then, boy, the love and the humility that Ben shared about.
Yeah.
Boy, these are 4 tools to help us connect with our kids
Mm-hmm.
in a beautiful and brilliant way. Okay, final thought.
Well, I just wanted to say, read some books. There's some great ones out there on all these different things. Screen-free parenting, parenting your powerful child, parenting toward the kingdom, the orthodox Christian principles, mothers and sons, the respect effect. We did another podcast on that one. And then parenting, getting it right. And the last one, the one we kept referring to here, was Age of Opportunity. So great resources for gospel-centered parenting that might surprise you in how they explain things and help you understand things. But I think it's honoring to the Lord.
Yeah. You know, if somebody's listening all this way and realizes, well, gosh, I didn't do it right in the discipline or the training years, or I'm not doing it right now, or whatever, what do I do? Well, I'm telling you what, we serve a God who restores the years the locusts have eaten. You are nothing is ever doomed. God is a God of redemption. And so it's never the wrong time to do the right thing.
Right.
So start doing what you know and watch God bring fruit that you couldn't imagine. We hope these have been helpful to you or to friends that you send them to. Susan, thank you for teaching us a lot and helping us. Ben, thank you for reflecting on the stuff that Susan brought in and man, added such amazing things. Will, as always, thank you for being behind the camera and behind the computer, keeping us rolling. And thank you all for joining us here, and we'll see you next time.